We're on. Michael Jaco, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan.
Yeah, this is really cool. As I was telling you just a couple minutes ago, I originally read your book several years ago, The Intuitive Warrior, and it talks about uh, your time with Navy SEAL teams, and the intuitive warrior part is like what made me pull it off the shelf. So you have a tremendous background with like the SEALs, CIA. I don't know so much about that. I don't remember all the details from the book, so it was quite a while ago. And then I've kind of like seen what you were up to more currently on your social media. So I guess if we can start with kind of like where you came from with the military, and then move from there.
Yeah, definitely sounds good. So I enlisted in the military when I was 18. So I had a dream when I was 5 years old. I remember seeing the Navy SEAL movie Frogmen. And it was a Navy SEAL back then because it didn't exist. But Frogmen was like around the World War II time frame. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do when I grow up because I just love being in the water. And, over time, developed myself, got ready for that. A lot of physical training, being a fish in the water, just love the water. So I just knew I had the potential of being a Navy SEAL, and that was my dream. That was my focus. And then when I came in the Navy, started out as a hard hat diver, and then went over and did the SEAL training. And then from there, I worked my way up. Always like a high achiever. I love to push myself, find new avenues, be the 1%er of the 1%, whatever I'm at. And so I eventually ended up at SEAL Team 6, which is like the pinnacle of being a Navy SEAL, and I was in a Red Squadron, which is kind of cool because it ties in to what I did in the CIA, finding terrorists, and I was deeply involved in helping to find Bin Laden, and that was part of the intuition that started to awaken in me, and that's around the time frame where I wrote that book, The Intuitive Warrior, and so my old team, Red Squadron, came in and actually got Bin Laden, so kind of like my claim to fame, when I look at something that's, what is it that I did, with all that information that I developed over all those years, and that would be it. So that intuitive aspect channeled into every aspect of my life. So that's cool that you picked up on that book, because that book, I think intuition is the greatest thing that we can tap into on this human level. You look at Einstein. Einstein said, let me know the mind of God, the intuitive mind. Also, Steve Jobs said that, average analytical process is nothing compared to intuition. So when you start to tap into your own intuition, all of us have it, all of us can connect with it. That's when you really start to open doors up to that, being that 1% of the 1%. So I always, push people into that realm, open your intuition. Because when I did that, all of the stuff that I had done previous was paled in comparison. So, I used to you became a Navy SEAL, you did this, you did that, you're top of your game and everything you did. And the reason why is because I was tapping into my intuition. Early on in my career as a SEAL, I wasn't really understanding what I was tapping into. A lot of us that become Navy SEALs don't really know what we're tapping into. We just think we're just like gifted, we're chosen or whatever. I went through that period, but eventually I got to the point when I went back as an instructor in the first phase where guys get pushed in Hell Week. That's kind of like the transition where you really learn that, wow, you're capable of much more than, the average physical capability we're led to believe that we're capable of. And once I went back and I started looking at all the people that were coming in, I knew that all of them had the potential, but only a few of them would really tap into what it takes to, go beyond that norm. And that's part of the intuitive process. So learning that whatever it takes, to go into these realms, I'm going to do it. And once I started to tap into that, and I did that with a martial arts training. I started the SEAL Team's first hand-to-hand program. And part of that was tapping into those, uncommon physical zones. So once I did that, I was able to go to an incredible level with, the martial training. And then it went to an even higher, an even different level when I started to work with the CIA. I was able to know when attacks were going to happen, weeks in advance. I would keep my teams away from the areas where the attacks were coming. So that intuitivity, that remote viewing that I started to tap into. So all of us also have, ability to remote view. And people will say to me, "Oh, that's, I can't even comprehend that." Well, that's something I've encountered throughout my career. Guys that I work with that were former SEALs, some of them I was able to train to these levels that were open to it. And that's one of the keys, just being open to this information.
Yeah. So I think what you said there at the end there, that's really key. Like being open to it. So even if maybe these people that are in the SEAL teams where they have no room for error, it's literally life or death, and not just you, but your buddy beside you. But so maybe do you find that like they see a spark, they have something happen that they can't quite explain, so they just like dismiss it because it almost like scares them that they could have these psychic or intuitive powers?
And that's good, Ryan, because like I said, all of us have these abilities, and being a warrior is one of the things that separates you from the regular, combat infantry. I would say a warrior is different from someone that's trained in, combat, or trained in martial arts, or trained in, any of the fighting styles. There's a point where you're going to reach this level, this resistance, because we're kind of conditioned to believe a certain way. And that conditioning comes from every aspect of our lives, from, the church, religion, from, school, from, social interactions. It could be even come from our parents and close relatives. They're conditioned a certain way, but there's so much more that we have within us. So breaking free, having the fearlessness of a warrior, because you're going to confront these things like you're talking about. Everyone will confront these at one point, and they can pull away from them, or they can push into them. And when you push into them, you're going to separate yourself from the average person, and you're going to get the average person try and tear you down, trying to pull you back down to their level. And we've all experienced this in different aspects. Anyone that's a high achiever knows what I'm talking about. So if you want to be a high achiever in any aspect of life, when you connect with these higher consciousness levels, as intuitive states, then you're going to go into be able to perform at these high levels. And anyone that's performed at a very high level in anything in life, whether that's business, whether it's sports, whether it's a mom taking care of their kids, you know what's going on with your kids on a different level. That's intuition. Women can tell us a lot about intuition. They know it. And so tapping into that is the key. It takes a lot of courage. It takes the courage of a warrior, fearlessness. So you have to overcome some stuff. Like I said, there's a lot of resistance to go into these realms, but once you go into them, you're never going to want to turn back, because the truth and the unbelievable abilities that you get within these zones is just phenomenal.
Yeah, I've been, I guess, into that stuff since I was a little kid. My mom's pretty intuitive, so it didn't take my stepdad very long to figure out if my mom says they need to leave somewhere or something, instead of being like, why, he just knows because she's right, she's picking up on something, so he just goes along with it. So it's been ingrained in me as that's kind of a normal thing, at least for us. And one time you're talking about the martial arts. I've never been in the military. I couldn't imagine what it's like to be in a real combat zone. I fought in a cage a couple times, but that's not the same at all. But I was training with a buddy of mine who, the main classes I took were like traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu. So we did all the throws, chokes, locks, kicking, punching, eye gouge, groin kick, all that stuff. And like no rules, basically. It's a killing art.
Yeah, very good.
But I was training with a friend of mine, and we had another buddy of ours was there. I was like, how about we just train like attacks from behind? And we were just kind of like, I mean, we were serious, but not like, we didn't think that we were going to do very well at all. And we did. And it was like over and over again. It even got to the point where like our friend was like sitting over at the side, and it got to the point where like I was like facing away from my buddy, and he could just like nod at me with like he's just thinking of like smashing me over the head, but not moving anything. So I couldn't pick up on floor vibrations, or just like nodding at me like with that intent that he's about to crush my head. And I would turn around as if I was blocking it. And so we were doing like punches to the head from behind. And I'm thinking I'm going to mess up all of them, but I got it over and over again. And then he decided to mess with me a little bit and like punch me in the kidney, and I blocked that one too. We're supposed to be punching towards the head, but I blocked the kidney punch too, and it's like, and he did the same thing. I wasn't. So it was like, well, when you go to like train these things, you're the first one to really do the hand-to-hand combat with the SEALs. Can you tell us like what that is? What did you do? What are the important things at that? Because it's a lot different than, you're going to shoot a guy from 50 yards or something.
Yeah, that's excellent, and that's beautiful. What you said about the combative styles. There's a lot of different combative styles. I look for the most offensive ones, and Japanese jiu-jitsu is definitely high up on my list that I look at. So that's what we actually incorporated into the hand-to-hand program. We looked at all the different styles. That was one of them we brought in. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu brought that in. And then I went to some other guys that were doing, some higher-end jiu-jitsu, and just kept bringing in the most offensive stuff into the system. Now, the stuff you're talking about where you start to know, things on a different level, that's an intuitive state. So you're pushing yourself, and it could start, early on, but it sounds like you've had a lot of, the offensive styles, and it happens faster in the offensive styles, the intuitive states. Now, what we would do is we build a foundation for the guys, and then we'd start them slowly at what we called a multi-fight, where guys would come at them from all at once. And we'd have as many as like 25, 26 guys in a class and one guy in the middle. So there's actually ways that you can, analytically defeat, guys coming in. But at some point, you have to go into the state that you were just talking about, where you just know on a different level, the intuitive level, when these strikes are coming and how to react. And that's what I could see when guys would make that transition. And it was unbelievably beautiful to watch that, because it took me, lots of practice. Fortunately, I was trained at a very high level with the offensive styles like we're talking about. And so it happened faster for me. The defensive styles, basically, it's a stop movement, and it happens within the mind that way. So the different nomenclature that we'll use, defensive fighting, it's basically implanting neuro-linguistically into your brain, a stop pattern. So we learned that early on. So we wanted to teach people that you take away those things that cause the stopping, the defensive words, defensive actions, and so forth. And once you understand that, once you transition through that, the brain starts to act much faster, starts to react much faster. And you can pick stuff up on a level that the conscious mind just cannot do. And that's the transition point. Again, it's when you first do that, it's like, oh, what did I just do? So someone that's not trained in this stuff is going to resist it. they're going to pull back to like, oh, that's scary. And it's not scary. It's something that's available to all of us. So once you say, that was good, I like that. So you're programming your brain to accept that. You're opening your mind, like we're talking about. And Bruce Lee talked about this as well. You're opening your mind. You're becoming like the water. Mm-hmm. You're becoming like a water molecule in the sea of water. And everything that happens within that sea, you know it instantaneously. It's like the shark that can know when a drop of blood hits the water. How does it doesn't smell that. It's like miles away. It's the vibration of that molecule of blood that hits the water that alerts the shark from miles away. And then, sharks come in. So it's the same way with the multi-fight that we would teach. You have all these guys attacking you at once, and then you were able to overcome them. You were able to move, kill, strike, take guys out with or without weapons, with or without improvised weapons. And it was just a beautiful thing. They had to fight for up to 3 minutes, constantly attack. So they'd kill some guy, snap a neck, crush a throat, whatever it was, kick a groin, snap a neck, throw him into the next guy coming into him. So different techniques for doing it, of course, for the analytical mind. And then you take it to the next level. You start to move, and you start to, be able to take down a whole room. Most of these guys, when they fought over 3 minutes, they would kill hundreds of people. So it's kind of like the thing that who was the guy in the Bible? Samson, was it Samson? Not Samson. Maybe it was Samson. Anyway, he killed like 1,000 Philistines. So Samson delighted, to cut his hair, and then he asked God for the ability to push the pillars of the temple, and then he pushed the pillars down and killed 1,000 Philistines. So he was able to do that. It's a technique. So you go into these states of consciousness, and you're able to tap into, not just the martial realm, because I train with the top guys in JKD, Jeet Kune Do, and eventually they get you to that point through their system where you're into these intuitive states. So what I was doing, and as SEALs, first hand-to-hand course, we started them at that state. So they became unbelievable fighters within a month. So it was a 30-day course, 10 hours a day for 30 days straight. 21 hours you do, or 21 days you do anything, 21 days you create a habit. So our goal was to push past that and do 30 days. So great stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. How do you? So I mostly train with friends and friends of friends. I started Japanese jiu-jitsu in 1997, and I've been to like some Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools. Trained with like a buddy of mine is pretty, I guess, well known in JKD also. BJJ black belt, certified in. He's like an encyclopedia. So I've trained with all these different people, and I like training with friends. And I'm always thinking, okay, how hard should we go? So I'm always like constantly analyzing that. So when you're preparing people for something as real as being in a real war, a real combat zone, you're going after real terrorists that you're not training, these people don't care about you at all. They would love to torture you, but you can't hurt your buddy because you don't want him to have a fractured arm when he has to fight a terrorist after hiking for 50 miles in the mountains or whatever. Like, so how do you know how much is enough? And I guess that's my question. How do you know just how far to take it in training?
It's a level of most people, you just can't just come in and do that kind of fighting like we're talking about. It takes a level of obviously conditioning, and I don't mean like getting in shape. I mean conditioning the mind. So we would take it. We would train the guys to like take it as right up to a point before you start to cause discomfort or pain. And so they're slowly learning that, learning the locks and stuff like that for the body. Like starting with a pinky, I can control someone with a pinky. So we start to, and that's Aiki Jiu-Jitsu type stuff. So we start to, get them to understand the body. And I can tell you, as at that point when I started the hand-to-hand program, I'd been in the SEAL teams for almost 20 years, about 18 or 19 years. And when I really started to get deeper and deeper into this and really started to get into the actual, what I went into eventually was Sayat Kali. So the Kali stuff taught me how to use the blade. And when I learned the targets that you use for the blade, it took me to an even greater level with my shooting. And it was the same thing with, I
wasn't expecting you. I thought you were going to say punching or something. Or like,
yeah, it's amazing, right? So you learn, like I can take a punch or a chop and take it right to that point on your throat. And I can do it so fast, you can't react to it. And it's just right at that level where if I took it just a little bit further, it would cause you pain. And I know where to take it, where it would cause you, you would like choking for, many minutes. And then I could take it to the point where you're going to die because your throat's going to swell up or I'm going to crush your thorax or whatever. So there's different levels and you learn those different levels. You know what it takes, to go there. And so like when I learned, okay, if I insert the blade here, it's going into this target. It's not like I'm just shooting center mass and a headshot. Now I'm shooting the heart. Now I'm shooting the brainstem. So I understand all that now. And that came from the martial training. So we never learned that as a Navy SEAL. Maybe they teach it now. Probably do after I brought it in. But it was the martial training that took my shooting to a different level. Because I would have guys, why do I need that shit when I have my gun? I was like, where's your gun right now? We're in a team or whatever. They're talking shit to me. So, I'll kill you right now without a gun. Mm-hmm. And they're like, whoa, so that level of awareness, that people say, I don't really need that stuff. Well, I think everyone would benefit from it. And if nothing else, it pushes you into these states of consciousness like we're talking about. Now, not everyone has to become, a Navy SEAL fighter to be able to go into these levels of consciousness, because you were just talking about going to these levels of consciousness. You're not a Navy SEAL, or, have you ever been in the military?
No.
Yeah. So I've trained with guys that I would take over a lot of military guys that have never been in the military that were martial artists. So it doesn't matter. It's kind of like the movie with Neo. Neo talks about, I want to learn Kung Fu. And then they'll like hook him up and they download, oh, I know Kung Fu. And so anyone can get to these levels of consciousness. You don't have to be a Navy SEAL to become intuitive. So you can do all these other things that we're talking about. There's different avenues to get into this. I mean, if you're a businessman, you don't need to train martial arts to go into these states of consciousness. These states of consciousness are basically just learning how to focus your mind, just to meditate and bring in these levels of consciousness. Now, as martial artists, we train into those levels of consciousness. As a businessman, as a mom, as a firefighter, as a law enforcement, you can go into these states of consciousness. It's easy, but I say easy, but the only thing that's going to resist you is your own consciousness, your own programming. So overcoming the programming that we all have is the key. So being open, like we keep talking about, and that's one of the keys. So we'll keep coming back to it. It's very important. Being open to the idea that you can go to these states of consciousness. I just was talking recently. I have one-on-one clients that I speak with, coaching them. And I just talked to someone recently where they're like, I train in martial arts. I always want to be like a Navy SEAL. I never went in the military, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you don't have to go into be, Navy SEAL level. Because like I said, I would pick a lot of martial artists that I've trained with over the years. And that doesn't mean every martial artist. It means those that have gone to the level that we're talking about, these levels that are beyond the norm of consciousness. When you go into those states, then, that's where you're tapping into it. So you can tap into this and be at a level that's even higher than most SEALs, consciousness wise, than they can, because you've gone into these states of consciousness. So don't beat yourself up because I at one time I wanted to be a doctor because I was like, oh, I want to heal people. Well, because I went into these levels of consciousness as an intuitive, I was able to heal people that most doctors would never be able to heal. So the thought consciousness that we have is phenomenal. And, I've learned to, focus that on every aspect. Just recently, I've done bodybuilding contests. The first time I did a bodybuilding contest was like almost 20 years ago. And I was still in the SEAL teams, and I was like, how can I take this? How can I take my conditioning to the next level? So I, sought out another, had a bodybuilding couple. So I'm thinking this, and lo and behold, a bodybuilding couple moved in to the condo that I owned in Virginia Beach. So they moved in, and then I started talking to them. I learned how to diet, about nutrition, and how, I could, because I was like, how I've been working out all my life and I just can never get that perfect six pack, And they're like, oh, it's all about diet. And then they show me, what to take out of my diet and how to, train correctly and stuff like that. And then, within a few months, I'm doing a bodybuilding contest and winning trophies. So it's sometimes that simple. We just have to find the right information. We have to be open to it. We have to put out that something that we desire, something that we want. We have to be open to the possibility that might come, and not to like push it away because people get scared. It's like, bodybuilding couple. Oh, I wish I could do that. Well, you've been wishing that. Go talk to them, So, and then that's why I am. It's like, there's something that I want and it comes into my reality. I'm going to go approach it, and I'm going to bring it into my reality to the level that I want to. And like I said, I'm a 1%er. I want to take it to an incredible level. And that's, if you want that, if you want to have that in any aspect of your life, then go to intuition. Be like the water, like Bruce Lee, you have to like, be in that state of consciousness, and that's going to start to attract these things to you.
So what do you do to develop it? Do you have some techniques that like anybody listening could start implementing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I actually teach these courses. I have a lots of courses that are actually available to anyone. Unleashing Intuition Secrets, so you can pull that up, and I have courses there. But for anyone that's just interested, it's the meditation. It's learning about brainwave states. So you can pull this information up and start to delve into this. Pull up intuition. Just do the online search. Pull up intuition and understand that you're basically going beyond the six senses. So you're like, going beyond the six senses. The five senses, you're in the sixth sense. So going beyond the five senses, what is that? As a Navy SEAL, I was always pushing my senses, and I would go into this different realm a lot of times, because I just, life or death, can really push you to different levels. So I'm like, what I want to see all the different, things. I want to be able to hear better, so we were out in the environment, and I'm like starting to pick up on, every little thing. I remember being like, one time we're in the desert, and we'd walked all night, and that was a 60 gunner at the time. And I carry like this heavy load, this heavy weapon, heavy load. So, it was really challenging for me to like move with a group, cause I'm carrying a lot more than everybody else. So we finally took a rest. We'd walked all night. We're taking a rest. And I remember just throwing down my mat, tarp, and just going right to sleep. So we're in a secure area where it's all quiet. So then my eyes pop open, and there's a tarantula walking close to my face, walking by. And I'm like looking at it, I'm like, he's not going to hurt me. I just knew it. And then I went back to sleep, and, a lot of people are like, oh my God, they're like jumping up, but obviously I can't, because we're going to be quiet and stealthy and on a different level, because I've been pushing myself for many years. I knew things on a different level, so I knew that the tarantula was not going to hurt me, So crazy stuff like that. You're like, how can you know that? It's like, I want to ask you, how could you not, cause I push myself so many times into these realms. I accept that I'm tapping into something more. So pushing yourself, learn to push yourself into, push your senses as far as you can push them, and, be safe with it. Don't put yourself in the middle of traffic and go, okay, I'm going to sense when the next car is going to come that would hit me. That's stupid. Right. So you're going to do it safely. I started to get to the point where I played this game where I would send my consciousness out, kind of like remote view. And I teach that as well. So I would remote view when I'm driving my car, where the next, officer is, checking speed. Not that I was speeding, I was just curious. And sure enough, I was like, okay, up ahead, I can feel it. There he is. And then I'd come up and sure enough, there's, police officer there doing, radar scanning. So I got to the point where I could do that at will. It was like, okay, where's the next one? Where's the next one? And I just could sense it, right away. I just knew, okay, it's going to be several miles up the road, or there's nothing. It's all clear. And I just kept repeating that, pushing those skills, pushing that consciousness level over and over again till it got to the point where it's just commonplace for me. And so what is it in your own life that you're trying to work on? Try and push into different realms. If you're in the business, you're in the stock market. So I can push into the stock market with my consciousness to go, the stock market's good, it's going to keep going up. Or the stock market getting ready to take a dive, or gold's going to go up. So I bought, silver and gold like crazy. And right around the time frame it hit its peak several years ago, I ended up selling pretty much all my gold and silver. So and make it a major profit. So you just learn how to do all that stuff. And whatever realm you're in, like with my kids, I just want to know I wanted my kids to be safe when they're young. And I knew when my son had hurt his head, I could see blood. He was like on a trampoline. And I didn't even know he was on a trampoline. I was just like that radar that I sent out, protecting my kids and knowing what they're doing. And moms will tell you this all the time. They do this all the time. I was like, oh, my son, he got hurt. I just knew it. And I was like, looked at it, I was like, is it bad? It's like, no, it's just a little blood. It just came back to me. And I was like, I just knew it. It's like, okay, he's okay. And sure enough, he came back and said, oh, I was on the trampoline. I hit my head, but it was okay. I was like, okay, yeah, that's good. And I already knew that. So we have this ability to tap into anything, and intuition is phenomenally amazing. It's beyond what we're capable of at this, level that we're at, this consciousness level. And like I said, all the greats, have always tapped into intuition, whether it was Einstein, like we talk about, or, going to Howard Hughes. I mean, I've studied all the greats, all the people that have done anything throughout time, and they've all talked about, you might not have named it intuition, but they all talked about tapping into this something more. Like we can go into religious aspect, Buddha, we can go into Jesus, all the greats, throughout time, always tapping into intuition, something more.
Yeah, it's really fascinating what can happen. Like I think I have kind of a thing with deer, and I had a crazy experience with an owl, which made me, and this is a tapestry, but crazy experience with a great horned owl that was a lot like that one. But like I'll go out, there was a cemetery not too far from me that I like to go walk around and go through the woods and stuff. And there's a bunch of deer there. It's a huge cemetery. It's like the 10th largest in the country or something like that. And I'll be like wanting to see the deer, and I'll just kind of like know where they are. So I'll just kind of like, at first I'm kind of like just looking around and then like, oh, I think they're over here in this patch of woods, and they will be. So part of me is like, okay, yeah, I just did that. But also part of me knows that, well, I know they hang out there sometimes, but not every time that I go to this patch of woods are they there. Sometimes they're over there. But sometimes I can just kind of feel it. I'm like, oh, they're over here. And then I'll just go. And I I teach at a wilderness survival school. Mainly teaching like strength and conditioning stuff, but part of it's like climbing trees or whatever, kids classes, adult classes.
Nice.
I'm not currently doing those classes, but sometimes I'll go like when they have like Boy Scouts come in, I'll go do like rough housing games with them, like a couple wrestling games, sumo, like simple stuff that you can learn in 10 seconds. But the owner of it, he's like real legit survival expert. Tom Brown Jr. is one of his mentors. If you've heard of him, the tracker.
Yeah,
Uh,
I did a lot of stuff with Tom Brown. Yeah.
oh, really? Okay,
Oh yeah.
awesome. I'd like to hear about that. Yeah, but one of the meditations that he does, his name is Matt Scholl. One of the meditations that he does, including with the kids, is like, okay, sit down. Like, now what's the closest bird that you hear? And then whoever, kids, little kids sometimes, they'll listen for the, okay, now what's the farthest bird that you hear? And then they're just off. They are, and these young kids that were like super hyper, wrestling around, doing crazy stuff just minutes ago, are sitting silently listening for that farthest bird that they hear. And I mean, it works. And he said like some of them, like they'll kind of like come out of it and then they're like looking around like, oh my God, the colors. And I mean, these are like little kids that are looking around like they can't believe the colors that they see. And like these amazing experiences happen like perfectly, like naturally, like literally naturally. Because these are, if you're familiar with Tom Brown, and I don't know how much of the story about grandfather is true or how much of it matters. Doesn't matter if it's true or not, kind of like, but there's like some powerful stuff. So like, what was your experience with Tom?
Yeah, that's great. You bring that up. So one of the guys that I was working with many years ago in the SEAL teams, turned me on to one of the Tom Brown's books, and I was like, this is that level that I've been looking for, and so that meditation and stuff like that. So I read all of Tom Brown's books, got to meet Tom Brown, got to become really good friends with him. I was still in the SEAL teams, basically did every one of his courses, and it took me to that different level. And then I eventually started running my courses for military and law enforcement and stuff like that. And then, transition into contracting with the CIA and stuff like that. So that's where I started to really push into these zones that we're talking about now into an incredible level. Not only remote viewing that I learned from Tom Brown, but also, taking my consciousness to a level where I knew prophetically, what was coming in the future, even to the point where I could begin to actually have a consciousness effect on the environment. So that's things that I teach all this stuff that I've learned over time. So Tom Brown, he has these different things that he teaches. Apache awareness. I got deeply into the spiritual side of the American Indian, and had a lot of friends, American Indians, that informed me. It took me into these states of consciousness, like you were just talking about. Then I brought them back and started to teach them the SEALs. So the stuff you're talking about, where the little kids are formerly hyperactive and turn their senses super hyper. That's kind of the stuff I was talking about before. Taking your senses to an unbelievable level. So that's what meditation brings. It puts you into these brainwave states. So I have to bring in science because, and I think everyone needs to know that. That's why I'm saying, look some of this stuff up, because you want the analytical side of the brain to start to get involved with this. So it's not all about, the creative side that we're talking about with intuition. You also have to bring in the analytical side. So science and spirituality basically takes you to a different level. So with the Tom Brown stuff, I brought it back to the SEALs. I blindfolded them. So I used to teach shooting, breaching, explosives, a lot of high-speed stuff that we learn as SEALs. And to take the guys that I was teaching, and this is some of the stuff I learned in the hand-to-hand program, take them to those brainwaves consciousness states, I would blindfold them, put them in a circle, and then I would have guys try to sneak in. So you have these stealthy Navy SEALs that learn stalking and all this kind of stuff at a high level, trying to sneak in on these guys. So if they just relied on their analytical process, just trying to hear this on a certain level, guys can do it. You know, guys would come in and touch them. You know, kind of like what you're talking about with the deer. If you're on a consciousness level, you can stalk up and touch a deer. So I saw this when I was on the Pacific Crest Trail for 4 months. I could just walk right up to animals all over the place, and they wouldn't startle because my energy was at a certain level. So you have to get the brain waves to a certain level, very calm, very intuitive, and then you can start to go into these realms. So eventually the guys started to pinpoint when the guys even started. Before they even started to walk in, it's like, okay, there's somebody over there, and I go, where? And I would be their sound, and they would say a little bit further out, right there. And if I could touch the person they thought was out there, then they were good. And guys would get to unbelievable levels with this, and they got so good with it. It's so funny because they took that and they went on the shooting ranges in the houses, and it was safe. So don't think it's not safe. I'm gonna tell you, but they blindfolded themselves, and I didn't tell them to do this. They blindfolded themselves and reached out to find where targets were, and were accurately shooting targets they did not know were there on the analytical process. The blindfolded came in, set up on the range safely, and then shot targets. Unbelievable. So it went to an incredible level. So yeah, the Tom Brown stuff was amazing. Learn how to do a lot of stuff, go into these spiritual realms, push my energy out there and know things, remote view like we're talking about. And that's the way the American Indian, like the Apaches, the Chiricahua, were able to avoid the cavalry for so long. Just little bands of Indians were out there running around, not being detected. And that's one of the ways they were doing it. They were becoming invisible, and they were sensing far out where the cavalry was coming, and they could hide and not be detected, even though the cavalry would sometimes pass right by them. And I've done this so many times, made myself invisible. And it's just a consciousness level. And to give you an example, I was in Pakistan hunting bin Laden, and the group that I was with, we had dropped off a vehicle to get some work done on it. And so I'm driving back with the vehicle. I'm in front of the other guys. And what I would do is I would make myself pretty much invisible. Of course, not invisible to the people that are on the road, so I got hit, but I would make myself invisible, to my enemy and so forth, or people that could be a threat. So people that could be a threat was my other team, because they had, weapons and stuff like that. So I'm just sending out this thought about becoming invisible to anyone that had guns that could do me harm. That's kind of what our explosives, whatever. So the guys that were following me, I met them back up at base, and they're like, what the hell happened to you? We saw you right in front of us, and then you just disappeared. So I didn't completely disappear. I disappeared to people that would cause me harm, or could have the capability, even my own teammates, because they had weapons and they could do some damage, I even became invisible to them. So these are levels of consciousness that we're talking about that are capable, that anyone is capable of. And I would teach anyone that was open to it. And like people listening to us right now, if you're open to this information, you can tap into it. And it's out there. It's available to everyone.
Yeah, I absolutely believe it. It's just amazing. So when you're talking about them going into the house blindfold, I was thinking, like SEALs, CIA, they want to do a lot of their work at night, right? Because they have the best night vision goggles, and more likely to surprise and stuff. And I was wondering, is there a time when, so it's dark, something happens, they get their goggles knocked off, and then they really are blind, and they have to like shoot through the wall, or I don't know much about like CIA. I guess I kind of like get the idea, and I've watched all of, I don't know if you've ever seen like the show Burn Notice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I know it's like, it's a show, but I've watched all of them. I always find it fascinating how he explains the craft as he goes on. He narrates his own story. And it's finally like fascinating, like what they do, but sometimes he has to like shoot through the wall. Like, so is there are there specific instances that you're actually involved with where you are fighting blind with your team, and maybe it's hard to know who's who because chaos, and is that shadow the enemy or is that my friend? Or
Yeah, you eventually reach a point like just give you an example that anyone can relate to. We start out our training with like we form a platoon and we're like, let's say we're patrolling, and there's hand and arm signals that we're going to use to communicate even in the dark. So we just like make them far enough away from our body so everybody could see it. Stop and move out. Simple movements. Eventually, after working with the guys for a period of time, you will start to notice there's no more hand gestures. Guys just know, they know when to stop. It's pretty crazy. And they know when to move out and what to do. Of course, there's still information you have to pass, verbally, like rallying points and so forth. But, information, but on a lot of levels, it becomes, you don't have to, do that verbal stuff anymore. So when you go into like we're talking about shooting, close quarter combat or so forth into a building, or you're walking down streets or whatever it is, you just have this extrasensory perception of where your guys are because you've worked with them. You just know on a different level. And I would try to teach guys this, it can go beyond that. It can go into telepathy. And guys are, some guys, were open to it. And I taught those guys, of course. But some guys were like, oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. And then, of course, I would, hear their thoughts and I'd say it. And they're like, oh, shit. And they get scared, and of course, they didn't want to learn. So it's a possibility that we all have. It's a potential that we all have. You just have, you think Navy SEAL, what are they? They can't be scared of anything. Yes. Everyone at a certain level is scared of something, has some kind of fears. And the greatest thing that I would teach, that I taught the guys in the hand-to-hand course was there is no fear. You can overcome that. Now I get in these discussions all the time. I used to go to radio talk shows and get in these deep discussions with people like fear is your friend. It's like, no, fear is not your friend because fear is constrictive. Fear gives you tunnel vision and starts to shut down your senses. So no, fear is not good. And the only thing that could be good is that instant, something's wrong. And that should blow open your intuitive abilities. That's when you go into a hyper state of consciousness. It's like, oh, what's that? I would get that tension in the gut, which all animals have, even humans, that tension, because the gut is like the second brain. It has a lot of neurons in it. So we get a lot of stimulus from the environment that we're not aware of. So you get those tensions like, oh, something's wrong. You get that gut feeling. So that is a basic instinctual thing. It's not of the consciousness of the intuitive state. So I teach both. I teach because this would happen with me. I would get that gut feeling, something's wrong, something's coming. And then I would go into that, state of consciousness where I tapped into the intuition, take a deep breath, let it out and go, okay, what is it? And then I would get these visions. It's going to be attack here at this time. This is what's coming. And I would put it out to my team on this date at this time, there's going to be attack. And everybody's like, what? Oh, you're full of shit. And then of course it happened. And they're like, oh shit, you're in touch with something. What else is coming? Then I would tell them the next thing. And they're like, we don't know how you're doing it, but we're going to listen, and that's good. You don't know the intuitive states yet. You haven't, opened yourself up to it. You're scared of it. You're not going to go there, but I'm there. Let me help you. And, I got a reputation over the years, and guys are like, what do you see? What's coming? I tell them, okay, in about a year, Iraq. I was in Iraq at the time. Said in about a year, Mosul's going to fall, and I'm in an area with with some good guys, and they end up, kicking some butt later, as we learned recently when we took out al-Baghdadi. So these intuitive states are helpful to not just on keeping ourselves safe, keeping ourselves and our friends around us safe, being informed, but also, like we're talking about, can help you in every aspect of life. And it was cool because you talked about, knowing when guys were coming, sneaking up behind you. That's an example of these higher states of consciousness you were tapping into. You're pushing out. You're like, you want to know, and then something comes in. Do you listen to it, or you discount it? So ask yourself, as you're listening to this, when these things come along, do you blow them off? Because when you blow them off, they don't come. You're just telling you're telling the intuitive state of consciousness that you don't care about it. Screw off. I don't want you. So when these crazy little instances happen, when you're like, wow, that was amazing, that's when you go into the attitude of gratitude. Because with that attitude of gratitude, you're going to attract more. So don't blow it off. It's like, whatever that was, I want more of that. And it'll start to come. And then you'll get someone that shows up like me or you, and you'll list, someone's out there tuning into this. They're going to listen to this, and they're going to be like, wow, this is the kind of stuff I've been, wanting to learn. And then boom, they're on that path. It's a lonely path sometimes, but really not, because once you start to move into these states of consciousness, you're in touch with everything there is. Once you go into these states of consciousness, and I call it the love energy, because the love is the highest, most powerful force in the universe. So when you go into these love states of consciousness, like I would start to do, I would come into, like where I was in the CIA, I was in all kinds of places all over the world, as you can probably imagine, that were combat zones. And when I would come into a town, we'd be in a building, I would send out this energy. I would think to myself, I'm surrounding this building, kind of like what I did with the car, surrounding my car with the invisibility to my enemy. I'm surrounding this building with energy that's going to protect this building, make it impenetrable to my enemy. So everywhere that I went for over a decade, I did that, and it worked. Eventually, I got to the point where I would do, well, let's expand. I was like, well, let's expand this. Can I do the whole city? I would come into a city. There'd be attacks on a daily basis, every single day for weeks. I would come into that city, and there would be no attacks the entire time I was there. I did this in Pakistan. I was in one city, Peshawar, and there were all kinds of attacks. I came in, no attacks. Even the CIA case officers were going, we don't know why we're not getting attacked, because all our intel is saying we're going to get attacked. It's because I've sent out that energy of consciousness. And some of the guys that were with me that knew what I was doing, I was training, they were like, they would look at me and go, get a little head nod, So then when I left that city, within hours, the attack started. As I was moving to another city, there was attacks in that other city. I came into that city. For the next month and a half, I was in that city, no attacks. So our level of consciousness has no boundaries. The place I'm in right now, probably losing some people right now, but it's going to push us a little bit more. So where I'm at in South Lake Tahoe, when I first got here, this place was ready to burn. So I brought in rain, I brought in the snow. There's no threat of that anymore, for the last several years that I've been here. So, the rest of California all around is burning, but Lake Tahoe is pristine. So you can bring in anything that you want to. And the only thing that is holding you back are your fears and your disbelief that you can do these things.
Yeah, I believe that too, as crazy as it might sound to people, but I used to drive a cab I drove a cab in Indianapolis for 7 years, and um, sometimes like I would like just like picture my heart chakra. I don't even know if I believe in heart chakras. Like as you might like pick up a book that says heart chakra. I don't know, but I would just like picture like imagine my heart chakra, and then the person in my passenger. They normally would sit in the back passenger seat, not all the time, but there was this, and then I would try to connect my microcosmic orbit to theirs. So it was like this line going from my heart to theirs, and then my microcosmic orbit, and I'm assuming you know what microcosmic orbit is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes kind of like this figure eight kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I can feel it. And this guy comes in, he was probably almost 80 years old. It was like he was at his like his girlfriend's house or something like that. And they'd been drinking a lot, or he'd been drinking a lot at least. So she helps him in the car, and then I kind of like I could tell kind of like what's going on. And he gets in the car, and he's old, frail, like pretty weak, and he's drunk. And so I felt bad for him, and so I started that thing. I connect my heart to my microcosmic orbit, his microcosmic orbit, get the figure eight thing, and he's like hunched over, and he sits up and goes, I feel a lot better all of a sudden. Just literally seconds, just a few seconds of me get the spin going, and he just like popped right up. And I mean, I've had that was one like real memorable experience. And then, I take him back. It's like a 20-minute drive, and his granddaughter happened to be pulling up and helped him in and stuff. But it was like, how do you explain that? Except how I explained it. That might sound super crazy. I mean, not to a guy like you, but to other people, like heart chakra, microcosmic orbit. That's yeah, it worked, and I have a lifetime of these sorts of things. So I was leading up to a question. I was like, oh, so when you're when you go into these cities that are getting bombings, are you like kind of like trying to like connect your heart to the enemies? Like we're the same, dude. Or are you like what is going on in your mind and your body? Is there a system that we can kind of relate to make sense of that?
Absolutely. Very good. Yeah. And that's amazing. You're tapping into that. Everyone has that capability like we're talking about. So I did it. I just do it at a greater level. But anyone can do this at a greater level. So like we talk about, want to understand the analytical process of what all this stuff is. So the heart chakra, like you're talking about, that's beautiful. Go to heartmath.com. So it's like, it's scientifically based. We talked about neurons. The heart has neurons in it. So it's a thinking organ as well as the brain. And it has a higher vibration than any other organ in your body. Sends out electrical energy, and this is part of the science of it. So when you start to connect with that energy, when you start to entrain your mind, you can entrain your physical thoughts with your heart and send it out like you were doing with that one gentleman in the back of your cab. So that's an excellent example of the entrainment that can happen between hearts. Now, to go on even further, so I talk about how I would leave a city and it would start to be attacked again. And while I was in a city, it wouldn't be attacked. And I was like, so I would leave and the city would get attacked again. I was like, dang it, how can I take this to the next level? So it came to me intuitively, because that's the way this information will start to come in. When you become intuitive and you ask these questions from a place of intuition, then the answers come to you. So I was like, how can I take this to the next level so that, it stays positive while I'm gone? And to just back up a little bit, the first time that I did the entrainment that you're talking about with someone who was going to attack. So there'd been a series of attacks in the city that I was in. before I started to expand my consciousness to protect the whole city. So I knew, like I was telling the guys, okay, we're going to have an attack on this day, at this point, at this place, at this time. And it happened. They're like, when's the next one? And I tell them, and it happened. And they're like, when's the next one? And I tell them, and they're like, oh my God, that's the building we're in. I was like, yeah, it's coming to us. So we evacuated the building, and within an hour before it was going to happen, I was basically praying. So praying is tapping into this energy too. Those that are very effective with prayer are the ones that realize they are sending a positive thought energy. If you just like pray out there and go, oh God, please help me, that's you're just, you know, I'll use a negative vernacular here. You're pissing into the wind. So it's not effective. But when you become effective with it is when you understand you have power. Your power thoughts go out and make this happen. So you hear about all these prayer groups, effective prayer groups that will pray for someone that's ill and then become, you know, like they're going to die and the next day of cancer, and then become, the cancer's gone from their body. So I've been part of those prayer groups. So when you become, you know, powerful in your thoughts and your energy, then you can make a very good impact. So I'm thinking, I'm remote viewing the attacker. So I'm like, okay, yep, the attacker's on track. Here he comes. He's gonna blow our building up. Too bad for the people that are still there that don't know, and we can't tell them, you know. So and that's kind of the way things are sometimes in CIA. You might know stuff, but you can't tell them because you give away your sources and so forth. So anyway, the attacker's coming. I can see it, and we had told the forces that were supposed to, you know, protect the city and so forth. They were overstrained because there have been attacks for, you know, several weeks, so they're stretched thin. We're telling them there's going to be an attack. Of course, they were responding to all kind of stuff. They were like, okay, yeah, we beefed up the security there. It's good enough. And I knew it wasn't. The guy was going to get through. So I'm seeing the attacker. He was like 18 years old. He'd been trained in a madrasa. So I'm looking at his history, and I started to go into his mind. I'm thinking, you don't have to do this. And he's like, yeah, I don't want to really do this, but, you know, I really want to, I want to know love. I want to have a wife, but, you know, I got to do this. I got to do this attack, and I'm going to blow myself up. So, oh well. And I'm like, you can have that wife. You can have that love. So I started sending him love, sending him this idea of having love. And he turned the car around, didn't do the attack. So I got a release. I knew that he had done it. It's kind of like, you know, what I said earlier about knowing my son had injured himself, but he was okay. So when I had that release, because I knew, oh, something's wrong. Oh, my son. And then, oh, he's okay. It's not that bad. So it was kind of the same release that I got when this guy turned away from the attack. So then to take it to a different level, I'm like, okay, how can I expand this to, you know, be, you know, the whole city. So I learned how to, you know, this took years of time, because you go through this process where like, am I doing this? And you're like, and then you learn that, yeah, I'm really having an effect here. I'm really doing this. It takes time. So we have to we're all doubting Thomases, you know, have to overcome those doubts, have to believe in ourselves, have to believe in the potential that we are something greater than we are. And then once you do that, then you start to go into these zones and you start to do more things. So I'm like, okay, so how can I expand this so that when I leave, how can I expand it so I can protect the whole city? I did that. So I was protecting the whole city when I was there, in this bubble of love, the love energy, the power of love, the power that comes from your heart chakra, like you're talking about. And I send it out through my thoughts. And then we could go into the pineal gland, but that's a whole different story. So that's another conversation. So I then send it out with thoughts. So with that energy out there, I just kept expanding it. Kept expanding it. The thing that took it to the next level again was when I made the connection like you're talking about. When I connected with like-minded people that did not want these attacks, and I could feel them out there. And then I started connecting. I didn't know them, but I knew they were out there. I could feel them. I could feel that energy. It's like you're talking about. You could walk into it. You could start to walk to this field and know where the deer were. You had that connection. So it was the same way with people that were there that were positive, that did not want these attacks. So I connected with them and I started to send them love, and it made it even more powerful, and it grounded it so that when I left, it was still going. That energy was still going, and there'll be no attacks when I left these cities again. So there's, that starting process, like you're talking about with a person in a cab. Then you expand it into something else. You learn that, hey, I'm really doing this. You expand it into something else. So it's a process. It takes time because we have all these restrictions that we're talking about from society and so forth that keep us, I say, dumbed down to our true potential. Our true potential is unbelievable. So like Jesus said, these things that I do, you can do, and even greater. So we're at that point. We're doing things, or I'm doing things, and other people are doing things that are even greater than some of these masters that have come before us. And you would think that after 2,000 plus years, we would be at that level. Well, we are. Mm-hmm. So, but some of us are still not awake. So hopefully this helps people see the possibility at least. And if you just have that sliver of truth, that mustard seed, you can move mountains.
Yeah. What are you talking about? Like the level we're at as a collective, and in just recent years, in a lot of the states, they're legalizing weed, and even a few states have now like legalized mushrooms. And I don't smoke weed, I don't drink, or I don't do anything anymore. I used to. It's been like over 7 years since I've even had a drink.
Nice.
That's another crazy story, like Angel's story. I won't even get into that. I've told it on the show a few times. Awesome. But basically, I met an angel driving the cab, and it was crazy thing.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. As you know, I have an angel story, or Archangel Michael. That's the kind of what put me over the edge too. That's cool.
Yeah. Like what do you think? Like with the collective thing, and it getting more popular to go down to Peru, and Purdue too. I'm sure you can do it at Purdue, but like going down to do ayahuasca and go out to do these. I mean, you can like Google it, like ayahuasca trip, and then pick your shaman. And you're like, and I've had several people on the show talk about ayahuasca, their experience. And now, like, I think it's crazy that any kind of plant is illegal. To me, that's really weird. Mm-hmm. Or a mushroom. But like, I see. You're probably familiar with Ram Dass.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so Ram Dass, he's like taking all the acid, and he's taking he's taking all of it, and then he's like, "Oh well, you don't need that." So he was like all about it, and then it was like, oh, that's not it. But I guess what's your? I don't know what my exact question is, but I guess what are your thoughts on it being legalized, it becoming so popular to do these supposedly, which I believe yes and no, mind expanding substances, and it being more socially acceptable? And what are your thoughts about what's going on with all that?
Well, I think people take them out of context. Even alcohol at one time was used ceremonially, and still is, of course. And basically what it's doing, it's shutting down the analytical side of the brain. Now, as security manager, I see what happens when people do that, and it's not a positive because it gets abused. But on a positive level, everything like we're talking about, plants are also vibrational. So it takes the consciousness and it puts it in a particular state. So everything has a vibration. So when you put something in you, food, whatever it is, it vibrates you. Like you've heard, you are what you eat, you are what you take. So, and it also has, with the level of ceremony, with the level of what your intention is when you take these substances as well. So I've had trips lined up to do ayahuasca, and they fell through at the last minute. And I remember I was working with an intuitive for a while, and they're like, "You've done that before in past lives. You don't need to do it again." because if you've seen my other work, The Awakening of a Warrior, where I go into past lifetimes, I talk about having a lifetime with Buddha, so, and Jesus, and a lot of the other masters throughout time. But you basically can, like, Ram Dass, he's saying like Buddha did, because Buddha did the extreme fasting. We see a lot of statues of Buddha being, overweight, jolly and happy. But there was a time where he was extreme in the fasting. And I've done, fasting. I've fasted for the 9 days. I do intermittent fasting now. That's part of my lifestyle now, where I fast for 16 hours and then I eat for 8 and then, fast again. So that's just part of my lifestyle. And it's something that I talk about in my work, where I was able to go, I just recently did a bodybuilding contest where I lost 50 pounds over a period of time and got down to a bodybuilding, physique, and did a competition and won the physique contest. Something that I've always wanted to do, get my body down to that lean a level, but it wasn't until I learned intermittent fasting. So fasting is very, very, very instrumental in helping you go into not just, controlling your body, but also your states of consciousness. So it takes a very focused mind to be able to fast for 16 hours every day. But it's very, very good for your body. It's good for your mind and so forth, because it gives your body a break. So Buddha, he fasted, did these extreme fast, and got to this point where his consciousness was at a level, and he was the same way. He came back and said, you don't need to do the extreme fasting. You can go into these states of consciousness if you follow my examples, what I teach. And that's what he did. Remember, he did 40 days of fasting. Who else did 40 days of fasting? Jesus did 40 days of fasting. So Jesus, basically it's the same thing. You can go to these states of consciousness without that. It's the same thing with these drugs. But if you're having, like the little kids, you're like, they're hyperactive, or like my Navy SEAL buddies are hyperactive. And then you teach them to calm themselves, and they go in these states of consciousness. So drugs, if taken in a constructive manner, and not like, getting stoned where you're like to the point where you're like barely can function, that's not necessarily it. You're just doing it recreationally, not it. Ceremonially, yes, because it's basically taking your brainwave state to a certain level. So the analytical side gets shut down, so you can tap into these intuitive states of consciousness. So if you're just new at it and you using it, ayahuasca, mushrooms, so forth, to put yourself in these states of consciousness, yes, they're a good thing. There's a lot of history throughout. I mean, all the way back to ancient Egypt, there's indications of where they did the Blue Lotus, and the Blue Lotus put them in these states of consciousness. So all throughout time, you've had all these different religious societies that have used some type of brain altering stimulant to go into these states of consciousness, to get in touch with the divine. And like you, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs at all. So I go into these states of consciousness. I've learned to do them at will. So anyone, just like Ram Dass, he did the work, and he's like, no, you don't need to do that. You can go into it by doing this, by going to those, calm areas. Like us, we go into the wilderness and we're able to calm our minds and go in these states of consciousness. When I come back out of the wilderness, like Jesus or Buddha, whatever, I can go to those states of consciousness at will, instantaneously now. And that's through, a lot of work, a lot of overcoming a lot of things, a lot of overcoming the conditioning that we go through. So when you start to go into these states of consciousness, when you're using, these mind altering drugs, if that's what you feel you need, then do it with that purpose. The intention is the greatest thing. So when I send my positive thoughts out to manifest something, I have an intention. I'm just not willy-nilly sending them out. I have an intention of what I want, and I'm very clear and very purposeful with that intention, because that's important. And I'll give you a little example. I was on the Pacific Crest Trail, and I was like, when am I going to see the next person? and then, I would see something I would see something in my mind, and I'd see what they're dressed in or whatever. And I get, super good at that. I was like, okay, when am I going to see the next person wearing white, and then I would see, I get a time and whatever. And it would come through like that. So one time I wasn't clear with my intention. So I was like, when am I going to see, or not when, but what is the next person I'm going to see? What are they going to be wearing? And I got red. And I was like, okay. So I'm walking. I'm not seeing anyone for a long time. I kind of forget about it. I set up camp for the night. I'm sleeping. I get up the next morning. I'm walking the trail, and I see a guy up ahead, and he goes, hi. I said, like, hi. And he goes, what time is it? And I'm like, who asked that on the Pacific Crest Trail? It's timeless. So I was like, that's weird. So I looked at my watch, and it was like, 6, whatever it was. So I'm like, what was that about? So I'm like, wondering. And then it popped into my head. He was wearing red. So you have to be, it's pretty trippy.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be very clear. Like I could have said, when am I going to see the next person? What are they going to be wearing? So that would have given, and that's what I do with everything now. You have to be very clear in your intention. So if you want to have the intention of experiencing whatever it is with, say, ayahuasca, then you want to have clarity with something that's in your life, and I've done this a lot of times. Then you go into, you send that intention before you go into that ceremony, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to get that back with super clarity. But if you just go in there like, oh, I just want to do ayahuasca and see what it's like, it's just going to be random. It's going to be a random experience. It's going to be a great experience. Most people say that they're great experiences, but it'll just be a random thing. Mm-hmm. So then eventually you get to the point where like, focus, okay, I want clarity on this. And then you're going to start to get it. And then you're like, because I work with psychics for a long time doing, learning about my past lifetimes. And eventually I got to the point where I can do that myself. So I go back into something will pop up in my head, and I'll research a lifetime. It's like, there I am again. So that's kind of the intention thing. That's very important. So yeah, I'm saying that I've seen people abuse all of that stuff. I've seen people whacked out on marijuana. I've seen people whacked out on mushrooms. I mean, to an unbelievable level. And then when you take one of those drugs and you add alcohol or other drugs, it's horrible what happens to people. So if you're just doing it recreationally, that's not cool. If you're doing it with an intention to, broaden your perspectives, to maybe you have a trouble relaxing, so you need that. Some people have a trouble relaxing, so they, have a drink or whatever. I don't need that anymore. I don't need to do a drug to go in these states of consciousness. So, but if that's what you need, do it with the intention to get to the point where you don't need it anymore. Try that. Like we've done. So, I mean, anyone can get away from that stuff and still have these, experiences.
Yeah. It's amazing the struggles people have with it. And I haven't had the time to really put my thoughts together with it, but something kind of struck me, like when you're talking about doing offensive martial arts and so it seems like there's some sort of connection between, okay, so for one instance, I was going to a judo class. It was at the traditional Japanese school, same place I did the jiu-jitsu, but I went to a judo class, and it was one that was just particularly rough. I spent the whole time bouncing off the mat, flying upside down through the air, getting slammed, choked. I mean, I just got whooped the whole time. And I go back into the locker room. I was like, man, today was just all about survival. And one of the upper belt goes, no, it's always about killing. I'm like, okay. Because I'm in there like, God, so I would imagine, I can't imagine what it'd be like to go after terrorists, but you can't go in there thinking like defensively. It's an offensive martial art. You're not going in there to self-defense these guys. You're going in there to you're hoping it's going to be 100% offense, right? And so I don't know what connection I'm trying to make. So if you're taking a substance in, you're almost like playing defense against it or something. I don't know, I haven't had time to like formulate the thought, but it just seems like there's like little seed of connection in there. Does that make any sense to you? Like, you
Yeah,
can.
the basically when you're taking the substance, whatever it is, you're basically allowing it to put you in these states of consciousness. So
Yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
like what you're saying. It's kind of like a defensive type thing. And I don't like defensive in anything. So I like to be in control, but I'm willing to like let myself go, you know, let my consciousness go. I mean, I've done a lot of those. I've done all those substances except for ayahuasca. I've drank, I've smoked pot, I've, taken mushrooms. But I don't need it. I don't need it anymore. It was just, I wanted that experience. Okay. It was safe. It's like, okay, what is it going to do for me? It's like, I can do that on my own. I don't need that. That's crazy. Why do I need that? So I'm not looking for a new drug. The drug that I have is my own. I can put myself in those states of consciousness myself to a level that most people that do those drugs can't even comprehend. So it's a defensive thing. So on the offensive level, like we're talking about, it's all about killing. So I have, not that I'm like looking at everyone, I'm gonna kill them, it's an offensive thing. So as an offensive person in everything that I do, I'm looking to go to the higher level. And that's what someone that's a higher consciousness offensive person is pushing the boundaries, is doing. A defensive person is holding back, trying to see what's going to happen. They want to like, okay, what's going to happen? 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 So, it's, I always love to take the guy that's defensive fighter. And I was like, okay, start blocking my strikes. So you block it. Okay, you're doing pretty good. And then I throw in like a kick to the groin. It's like, oh, and then it's over, because I'm like up here doing this, and then the kick comes to the groin, and like, and it's done. So as an offensive fighter, I keep attacking until I win. I'm a winner. Mm-hmm. So when we trained, one person would be the defensive, eventually loser, so you just give yourself for the other person to train, kind of like we were talking about, you get thrown around the room in judo and stuff like that. But you're learning through that process as well. You're like, okay, someone that's a very defensive person, they're going to be flying across the room eventually, and because I'm an offensive fighter, and I will keep coming, and I know this, the particular strikes, because I'm an intuitive as well, because I'll know when you're sneaking up on me well before you get there. Mm-hmm. I'll get to the point where I'm shutting you down when you're thinking about it. You're getting to that level with that consciousness. Okay, I can expand myself. Okay, there's somebody coming to kill us. I turn them off. Like I talked about the one guy. So I just kept expanding. It's like no one can enter this bubble. No one came into the city and fought. Okay, when I leave, the people that don't want this to happen are going to keep this bubble going. And I leave, and no attacks would come. Or I'm in a place that's about ready to burn from a drought, and I'm bringing in rain. So all these different things we're capable of, but only if you're an offensive thinker. So that's one of the keys that I learned, fortunately, early on as a SEAL, because SEALs are extremely offensive. Mm-hmm. And I took it to the point where like I'm reaching out to shut you down without having to kill you. I'm at that point. And then people are like, well, what about the guy that just gets in your face and is ready to fight? Well, I know what I'm going to do to that person. If I can't, get to their consciousness on that heart level, I look at someone, I know I'm going to chop their throat, or I'm going to put my finger in their eye and put them on the ground and cuff them up. I know that if it gets to that point, and I've been there, done that. So, you don't go to those places unless you have intuition, unless you have an expanded consciousness. So I can take it down to the level where I'm at a physical fighting level. Yes, I still do that. And because I know there's people out there going, well, if I learn this stuff, I don't have to have a gun, or I don't have to fight. I don't have to learn how to fight anymore. That's dumb. You know, you still have to have all that stuff too, and more, if you're in that line of business. Now, if you're a businessman or a mother or whatever, you know, you don't necessarily have to have that, although you might think you do now with all the terrorist attacks and stuff, or, you know, children getting snatched and so forth. You might want to reconsider not learning some martial arts and even teaching your kids. So, and it could be just the basic stuff, the simple, learning when someone grabs you, how to move and, get out of it, So I teach, kids like you, I teach kids as well. And I teach them basic stuff, or I teach people, moms and stuff like that, on a basic level. But I also teach them mainly the offensive mindset. So the offensive mindset, transitions also, like we're talking about. It's like the intuitive state of consciousness. So I can look at someone, I can say they're a defensive thinker. And not that, I look at them as a loser, but I look at them as like they're not going to reach their full potential when they have that kind of mentality. And that's, it's just as simple as that. And I've gotten to the point where, it used to bother me that other people weren't at my level. And I was like, who am I to be at this level? And, I just get wrapped up in that. That's bullshit. So get to the point where you understand that you are a powerful being and that you have incredible power. Get to that point. Just get to that point. And then all the other stuff will fall into place. Whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, come at it in an offensive mindset. Come at it with, I want to win, whatever it is. And that was the greatest thing that, I learned as a SEAL. We were winners, If everyone in our group had that mentality, it was like those guys that went in and got bin Laden, impossible odds, just to get there. And then they had the helo crash and they worked through that. So you're talking about, all that stuff. I was there in Pakistan when it happened. I saw, because I was, involved in the whole process. So, and I saw bin Laden within an hour after they had shot him. So I hear these people with this conspiracy stuff that no, we didn't really get bin Laden. Well, it was bin Laden or somebody that looked a lot like him. So you can take that for whatever it is. They did the DNA on him, and it was bin Laden, because they did the DNA on his kids and his wives. They got to talk to his wives quite a bit, and as you might well know, and or might well think about. And I got a lot of information. There was a lot of terrorists went down, and a lot of terrorists that went down after that raid. So offensive mindset, very important.
Yeah. I'm always thinking about, because I train. I know a lot of martial artists that are way better than me, but I teach people too, and I might try and teach them how to win. So even if I'm sparring with a 15-year-old girl, she is beating me most of the time. I'm going to get some reversals. I'm going to put her in some bad spots. She's going to get out of them. What I've found is, like, when I've done this with people, whether it's like guys or whatever, they get better and better, and then it's like less pretend for me to be getting beat. And like one of the women in particular, she'll go to other jiu-jitsu schools and she'll beat some guys, and like the 15-year-old girl that I'm talking about, she's on the wrestling team, and now she's beating boys. And so, like, she's beating me, it's kind of pretend. I'm teaching her how to win. I don't see the point of just throwing her in all these chokes and submitting her 100 times. And but it's like some schools kind of do that, where they, like, one of the people that I trained was going to another school, and the teacher just like would submit her over and over again in their 3-minute sprint. Well, does that make sense? I mean, yeah, it's real. You got to be faster. You got to be like, are you learning how to win? Because it seems like a lot of these jiu-jitsu schools, and I even heard it from a Gracie, or well, it might not have been the Grace. No, it wasn't the Grace. It was some other Brazilian jiu-jitsu school saying, like your first year, you should just be working on defense. I'm like,
Mm.
what? I mean, these are competitors. These are high level champions. They have the medal, they have the trophy, they have the black belt, and I'm thinking, what? How does that like do you have like a specific like protocol for how you approach like physically working with somebody who you can beat them 10 out of 10 times, you can submit them 10 times in 5 minutes. Like, are you like letting them work? Are you letting them?
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, it becomes a business for a lot of these guys. You know, we look at positive businesses, and I wouldn't say necessarily negative, but you know, it's kind of like you look at the drug industry, you know, the medical industry right now. They're not in preventative medicine anymore. They're into, you know, having you get, you know, treatments and, you know, surgeries and being on medications for long periods of time, sometimes for the rest of your life. So they don't make money otherwise. So some of these martial artists, same thing. I mean, yeah, I can teach you, you know, how to roll, how to do katas, you know, this simple technique here, but that's going to make me a lot of money over time. But the same thing. So offensive mindset, defensive mindset, it's a dangerous place to go because you're teaching failure. You're teaching stop motion. And like I said, like you hear it in football and you hear it in sports all the time. The best defense is a good offense. So it's the same thing with the martial arts realm. It's if you're teaching someone to think like we're doing, um, it's beautiful because it transfers to everything in their life. Because a lot of people have fears, and even a lot of the SEALs that I used to teach had fears. And when I taught them the offensive mindset, it overcame a lot of their fears that had been conditioned into them, and they became more effective as SEALs. They became more effective as husbands. You know, they became more effective as fathers. So you take that mentality, and it goes into every aspect of life. So when you teach defense, it's like holding back. You're waiting to see what the other person's doing, and you're going to respond. You're going to respond to that person. You're not in charge. You're not in control. When I touch you from that point on, I'm going to be in control, as you can probably imagine. So if you get the lucky, if you get the guys were coming to me, what if I come up behind you and hit you in the back of the head with a shovel? I was like, hey, you got me. Okay. You know, my martial arts aren't going to work then. But like we're talking about, I was teaching guys when we used to do sensory removal, we would go, you know, with knives, we would go, oh, because we want to be silent. Of course, there was a guy there with a gun to back him up, and the guy turned and get shot with a silenced weapon. But, and you go, well, why not just shoot with a silenced weapon? Because when they fall, they're going to make noise. So we want to control the whole process, control offensive of the whole process. So obviously it takes not a lot of training. You know, you stick a knife into this area, stick a knife there, and it's over. You know, there's no more if you do it correctly. And there's certain, you know, key points. So I would have the guys, like, you know, we talked about, there'd be a guy in Sentry, and it could be windy. It could be on the beach. It could be windy where you're not going to hear anything, you know? And I would say, okay, like we talked about, okay, start out. And the guys were like, and I'd tell the Sentry, okay, if you hear anything, turn around. So if the guys weren't stealthy enough or whatever, the guy would hear them and turn around. So it got to the point like we're talking about, and we're going to go deeper with it now, where guys knew they were coming right when they started. So I was like, okay, here's where the intention thing comes in. If you're intending to come in and kill them, they're going to pick it up, because we're training people to go into these higher states of consciousness.
Yeah.
Block your mind, empty your mind. and Bruce Lee talked about this too. Empty your mind, you know, become the cup, you know, with the water coming in. So I'd have them empty their mind, and I think about what they're going to do, you know, get the process down, you know what you're going to do, and then empty your mind. So the guys that were good at emptying their minds would always get up and do the kill. The guys that had that monkey brain and couldn't shut it down, they get discovered right away. So we can go into these higher states of consciousness and everything. So teach people that. If you're going to teach anything, it translates into every aspect of life in a positive way. Teach them the defensive styles, the defensive thinking, and you set them up for failure in life. So those guys, and I've been around a lot of martial arts instructors over time, obviously. So those guys that teach the offensive right from the beginning, like I was teaching, you know, the Navy SEALs, because I didn't have time to, you know, teach guys for years. I needed them to get there quickly and make them unbelievable fighters within a short period of time. And it was hard enough to get the guys away from their commands, you know, to get them to do that. But then once people started to see this stuff is badass, these guys are coming back even more powerful, started sending guys to me. So if I were to teach them negative, it would have taken years. Same thing with a martial arts instructor right there. I look at how are you teaching? Is it defensive? It's not going to be good. Is it offensive? It's probably going to be good. And then how long does it take me, you know, to get your information? Do I have to do, you know, 20 hours to get one technique? Not so good. If in 20 hours I get like a lot of techniques and I'm good at those techniques and I can see how they apply, I can think through them, I can take out anyone with them, that's good. So, you know, that's just a, you know, basic thing. So you know, anyone that's teaching defense in anything, I have, you know, I've put in resumes to different places over the years, and I get guys will ask me, okay, what's your biggest fear? I'm like, this is bullshit right now. You know, I don't have fears. I don't have fears. If there's something that I'm resistant to, I'm going to learn it. I'm going to attack it. I'm going to get offensive with it and get good at it. So I don't have fears. And if you're asking me that, then I can see it. Your corporation is not very effective. Your corporation is creating disunity. Your corporation is treating people and not putting them on the level they can be, not reaching their full potential. Because you want to know their fears. You know? So you have something on them. What are your fears? What are you weak at? That's what you want to know about me? What about my strengths? So that's what I do with people that I work with. And I've done that for my whole career. I've looked at people's strengths and I build on those strengths. If there's something they're not that good at, then, you know, I'm not pushing them into that. That's dumb. You know, if you have a team, you have a lot of people that have certain skills. Like we have a corpsman, a guy that's medical. He goes to the medical schools and gets unbelievably good at that. Does everybody have to know that? We know a periphery. Yeah, I can give it an IV. I can, like, you know, stop bleeding, all that kind of stuff, wounds. I can do that. But these guys are at a different level with it. Now my shooting ability with the automatic weapon, big heavy weapon, is way beyond the guy that's, you know, using, you know, the silenced sniper rifle. He goes and does specific training in that. So everyone has a different skill. Everyone has a different ability, and they, you know, that's what they want to do. They're good at that and they want to push that. We let them go do that. I'm like the incredible martial artist in the group. Does everyone have to know martial arts at my level? No. Does that make them weak? No.
It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to cut this off now. I got to get going. I have a client and a couple clients in about 20 minutes. I'd love to pick this up another time.
Absolutely. Good.
How can people find you? How do they, I know you just wrote a screenplay and a book, and so how do people find what you're doing and how they can learn from you?
Yeah, I have a Unleashing Intuition Blindness.com site. Also have Unleashing Intuition Secrets site where I do online courses. And that's really where I'm trying to focus people right now, getting ready to launch a lot more courses. So I have like a really good basic course, different pricing for you. You can come in and buy it, at a discount if you pay full price. And then, there's a payment plan. Have stuff for working out. So I'm into the physical aspect. I'm in the intuitive aspect. Of course, the physical aspect has intuition in it. And the next thing I'm going to release is a remote viewing course, past life course, remote, all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot more courses coming out in the near future. So Unleashing Intuition Secrets is where you find all that stuff.
All right. Well, thanks, Michael. I'll go ahead and stop the recording. I'll talk to you for just a second when we're done. I really appreciate you coming on. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun. Thanks.